Hello everyone and welcome to the Eddie Proudfoot podcast. Today on our 8th episode, we're going to be talking about races in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. So let's just get right into it. In D&D, there are 9 playable races that are available for you to choose from in the Player's Handbook. There have been more released since the Player's Handbook. However, due to simplicity, I'm just going to focus on these races for the time being, and then in later episodes, we're going to potentially talk about some more exotic races that have been released since the original Player's Handbook was published. Now, races are going to have a bunch of information in each of their sections. They start on page 18 and go all the way up to page 43, each race getting about 2 to 3 pages, just dedicated to their history, their culture, and lore, and even some name suggestions. Then at the very end, there is this section called Race Traits. It'll be whatever the race is, so it's elf traits, there's human traits, so on and so forth. These traits are going to be the mechanical rules that tell you why your race is important and what your race is going to do for your character. Way back in episode 3, we talked about ability scores and what they are and how they're used. Every race gives you an ability score increase. These increases are either +2 or +1 to a certain set of stats. So you can go peruse through the different 9 races and see which ones buff each of your stats, or on page 12, there's a handy table which just summarizes it all, along with the classes that go well with those ability scores. The second piece of information you get from your class that's mechanically important is your age. So your age isn't too mechanically important, but it can be important for role-playing purposes, and it tells you when this race reaches young adulthood and then when they reach old age. Then there is alignment. We talked about alignment in the last episode, and the reason it shows up in your race is because due to the different cultures of the races, they have different alignment tendencies. However, all the cultural stuff about races is very subjective, and it depends if your DM's actually going to be using that material in their campaign actively, if it'll actually matter or not. So talk with your DM if they have their own ideas for how the race history has gone in their world, if it aligns with what it says in the Player's Handbook, or if it's something completely unique for their campaign that they've derived. The next piece of information you get on your character is their size. Size rules is something we haven't gotten into yet, and we'll talk more about it during combat. What you need to know right now is there's 6 different sizes in D&D: tiny, small, medium, large, huge, and enormous. For players, the only sizes you typically see are small and medium, though.
With the exception of gnomes and halflings, all the races in the Player's Handbook are size medium.
The next piece of information that's also mechanically important that we also won't talk about till we talk more about combat is speed. So your speed is either going to be 25 or 30 feet, and right now all you need to know is that's how far you can move during a turn of combat. Finally, the last piece of information you get is the languages you speak. Every race will speak Common, which is nice because it means that everyone in the party can always communicate with one another. You're just speaking Common. And other races will typically have access to other languages. And in the future, I might do an episode that talks about the different languages and how they're similar in some ways, because there is a little bit of interesting information on that in the Player's Handbook. Now, we've talked about all of the common pieces of information that come from your race. However, there are things unique to each race. There are special racial traits, and the special racial traits are going to be in the same section, and they're just going to have unique headers. Like, for example, elves have one called Trance, dwarves have one called Dwarven Resilience. So if you see something that doesn't follow ability score increase, age, alignment, size, speed, or language, it is a unique or special race trait.
Dark vision is an example of a special racial trait that a lot of races have access to. In fact, only humans, halflings, and dragonborns do not get dark vision. Dark vision means that you're able to see up to 60 feet in darkness as if it were dim light, and you can see up to 60 feet in dim light as if it were bright light. The last trait that I want to talk about is subraces. So only 4 of the races in the Player's Handbook have subraces, and these are dwarves, elves, halflings, and gnomes. What a subrace does is give you more options for that race when picking it. Basically, your subrace is going to give you an additional ability score increase, as well as some special racial traits that are only available to that specific subrace. So it just allows you to have a little bit more flexibility when you're picking one of these types of races that have subraces available. Okay, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Eddie Proudfoot podcast. If you enjoyed it, please follow us on Instagram, Spotify, or Twitter. And as always, may the gods have mercy on your soul.